Man, some people are starting to sleep on Marvel's What If, and they're going to really regret that when these characters start popping up in Doctor Strange 2. That's right. I don't want to go too far here with spoilers, but after Captain Carter, we have our next strongest candidate to break through into the MCU proper, and that's evil Doctor Strange, who's pretty badass. A mystical chimera with a totally different cape. Wouldn't that be an amazing reveal if you're like, that's the wrong cape? And for those of you who aren't watching What If, you will have no idea what the subtle giveaways are. This is so fascinating, the way this all so beautifully comes together. I think perhaps more than any other episode to date, this one has been setting up potential live action shenanigans. Now, speaking of that, on a side note, it cannot be a coincidence that Shuma Gorath has shown up yet again. We're just 4 episodes into the season, and here's this squid once more, aka the God of Chaos. A neat Hydra reference in the first episode, but actually interacting with Hydra. But here, when they had that one shot of, right as Doctor Strange was absorbing Shuma Gorath's tentacles, I thought of Doc Ock as well. I was like, oh, this ties together pretty beautifully. And also you might recall there were some rumors a couple of months ago that Shuma Gorath would be the villain or a villain in Doctor Strange 2. And hey, if he's absorbed by evil Doctor Strange, well then technically if evil Doctor Strange were to show up in Doctor Strange 2, then the Shuma Gorath rumor is correct. So that would be a fun roundabout way to have that come to fruition. Now back to the cape, I have to say, when evil Doctor Strange killed the Cloak of Levitation, or Cloaky, as I screamed in my mind, not Cloaky, I was pretty devastated. In fact, I was much more upset than when Christine Palmer died again and again and again and again. I felt like I was watching MCU Final Destination. Like in the pizza shop, I was like, is Christine Palmer being targeted? She wasn't even like an accidental death during that robbery. That guy came in there specifically to kill her. That was crazy. And I have to say, feeling the loss of Christine Palmer, I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch did some heavy lifting with his voice work. Good for him. But that was my one biggest problem with this episode, because neither we nor Doctor Strange never really got the chance to fall in love with that character in the original film. She didn't even go with him to the event in that movie, even though she is, of course, played by the wonderful Rachel McAdams, who cannot help fall in love with her. She's so wonderful. But, I was like, I don't think Christian Palmer was this big a deal. I don't know why he's so upset about it all of a sudden. I guess in this universe, he was. And maybe, by the way, her lack of importance is why at first there was talks that she didn't want to return Rachel McAdams for Doctor Strange 2. But then, of course, she was later convinced to do so. Perhaps Kevin Feige said, hey, we're bringing in an evil Doctor Strange, and you're a lot more important in that story than you were in the good Doctor Strange's story. So she's like, okay, I'll come back, and I'll do a voice in What If. Everyone's invited back here. We don't have any no-shows this time around, which shows, it would seem, the importance of the Doctor Strange universe in Phase 4. And this also means perhaps we have even more Tilda Swinton cameos in our future. Plus, I like this new addition, Ike Amati. I really liked his character design with the face markings and the blue and brown eye. I thought that was really cool. I was like, hey, and Ike Amati looks just like the character, so I'd love to see him also, who knows? Again, everyone here is fair game going forward in live action because it's all connected. Although, what kind of librarian leaves somebody, unguarded in the library? I mean, Doctor Strange was alone in there for centuries to pillage the library and power up to a level that clearly everybody could see was a mistake, but Doctor Strange. That was also weird. Nobody would stop him. It was really weird. It was really weird that everyone, all these second and third lines of defense within the mystical world were like, oh, this is unfortunate. I mean, we could understand why the Watcher couldn't intervene, but what about Ike Amati's character or Tilda Swinton's the Ancient One? They were all just like, man, this is gonna suck. Too bad we have a front row. It's like the Eternals. How many things in the MCU can't interfere? But during that amazing montage, when Doctor Strange was powering up, which was so cool, we're going to talk about that, I thought back to General Ross in Civil War, talking about how many of the Avengers are living nukes, and that that kind of power just can't be left unchecked, even if it is wielded by an individual. At what point does an individual become so powerful that the rights of an individual no longer matter when it threatens the group? Very interesting. Doctor Strange, as the Sorcerer Supreme, and the other sorcerers who trained him and that he's trained with, are supposed to be that protection when it comes to the mystical realm. But clearly that's not enough, especially when the potential for damage is so great. Also, where the heck is the TVA? They still exist at the end of Loki. Kate Herron said it's, you guys, at least in terms of how she views it, there are different TVAs at that point. But still, even if there are countless multiverses, they're supposed to still be policed unless this somehow all factors into Kang's plans. I mean, for someone who likes to keep it simple, Kevin Feige is making things exponentially more complicated. He seems to be switching in variants for Skrulls instead of who's a Skrull, who's a variant. Skrulls and Secret Invasion, a storyline he is doing, by the way. We'll see how he does it. But that was nice and neat, shapeshifters. Again, keeping it simple. But I fear that mixing time travel and multiverses might have created a Pandora's box. Just ask evil Doctor Strange, who does that very thing, mixing time travel and multiverses in this episode. And perhaps that's the point of this whole episode, as the Watcher says at the end. Maybe evil Doctor Strange won't be a villain in Doctor Strange 2. Maybe he'll be a ghost of Doctor Strange's future to warn him. Maybe he'll be a little bit of both. Because in classic Marvel fashion, the Ancient One, of course, asks us not to view him as a villain. It's like, he's just misguided. And you're like, Marvel, you can have a villain. It's okay. All right, so let's break down this episode. It was really, I thought, particularly good when I looked at it a second time. And I think the first time when I watched it, because this was my first, I hadn't gotten this in advance as a critic, not really ever connecting with Rachel McAdams, Christine Palmer, kind of kept me from the first time around connecting to it. I think I focused more on Doctor Strange the second time around, and that, of course, helped. So the Watcher was not just passive in this episode, but I think that's why they had a little more. They've been slowly increasing his visibility, literally. So when Doctor Strange first showed up for this date, I was like, man, he's got to be careful not to be too Tony Stark. Of course, there are overlaps in the two characters, but I think it's important they maintain some distinction. I don't want, Tony Stark is not replaceable. Thank you very much. Also, Benedict Cumberbatch just is not a Tony Stark type of personality. So he picks up Christine Palmer, and she's like, you promised me creme brulee. And I have to say, I recently did a cooking class for my mother's birthday was in July, so we did a cooking class. I'll put the link down below. It was a French cooking class, and we made creme brulee, and it was the best. It was vanilla creme brulee. It was the best I've ever had. I finally understood creme brulee, and I was like, I can see why it's so it's her motivation, basically, to go to this dinner. I mean, you think she might be just teasing because, she doesn't want to look like she's too desperate on their date, but I don't know. Creme brulee is pretty amazing. And then they cut to this fateful scene from the movie where he's driving on an extremely dark road. I hate it when, whenever I'm on a road and they don't pay for a lot of lights. I guess they're like, you have headlights, and you're like, yeah, come on, where are my tax dollars? But that was a very powerful scene in the original film. So that gave me actually an emotional flashback to that scene. I was like, that was an amazing scene. Although in that sequence, again, Christine wasn't in the car. He was actually trying to get some new cases to up his profile even more as he goes to an awards benefit to talk about how awesome he is. And he was distracted. He wasn't looking at the road because he was looking at his next potential case. But here he's looking an awful lot at Christine Palmer instead of, I hate it in movies when people don't watch the road. Watch the road! But this time he decides to try and go around a truck, and he almost gets into an accident. And I thought they did a good fake out where his cool, amazing sports car manages to get him out of it. But then some weirdo, it's almost like someone took a hit out on these characters this episode, hits him from behind and sends them careening over the edge. And I thought this was a great shot because, the shattered window almost looks like a broken heart, which of course is what's happened to him. That's the whole title of the episode. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? And I was like, I don't remember him loving anybody except for himself. All right, and his hands. All right, so That's her funeral. And so that's what makes him go and study the mystic arts to become Doctor Strange. I don't feel that's the same motivation, because he couldn't do surgery, which is why he had to go somewhere else. He could still do surgery, so I think he would have just stayed on that path, quite frankly. Maybe gotten a wing in the hospital named after her. But anyway, we do a little bit of a retread of the movie with the apple, and they're like, stop doing that. And then the Ancient One passes away, and there's the Watcher looking super cool, watching. And then we have the whole Dormammu thing, although the time loop, of course, is used again here very nicely with him reliving Christine's death. And also the important line, I've come to bargain, because the idea that you cannot bargain with these celestial beings. And he's like, I do it all the time. And then they have this flash. I'm like, I don't remember them having any romantic scenes from the other movie where she's staying over and she's wearing his t-shirt, et cetera, et cetera. You've seen it a lot in movies. So he's remembering that on the anniversary of her death. And Wong is like, I could take that away from you, or maybe, I don't know, report you to all the other sorcerers, and maybe all of us could take it from you. Instead, Wong's just like, I'm going to make some tea, and maybe you should join. I mean, that's what Wong is. He's doing it in No Way Home. More recklessness, with Wong just being like, he's like, Jiminy Cricket? He's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, but that's all I'm going to say or do about it. But he does it, and he sends himself back in time to pick her up. And then we have our montage, another montage of a lot of deaths. So, this first one was, got hit by a car taking a different route. Then she had like a heart attack at the event, which I thought that was crazy. Then again, that guy just shoots her for some reason. Then he tries not picking her up. That dress is very nice. And then her building explodes for some reason. I was like, whoa. And then she's like, okay, I'll let her drive. And then they get hit again from behind. So he really loses his temper, which at that point I understood. And he screams into the air. And then the Ancient One comes back. And Marvel's like, man, we should not have race-bended this character, and it's just going to keep coming back to haunt us. So and the Ancient One explains that this is an absolute point in time. And you're like, a lot of rules here, man, but rules are made to be broken. And that's how Doctor Strange feels. Because she's like, if she doesn't die, you won't become the Sorcerer Supreme and you won't defeat Dormammu. And I'm like, well, what if he just crushes his hands instead? Because I visited another timeline where that worked. So I don't understand why he couldn't come up with that. And I don't understand her reasoning in that regard. And also, she's like, you have to become the Sorcerer Supreme. Although we know in this very show, we're going to get an episode where Spidey's the Sorcerer Supreme. So she's like, okay, I'll take you on. And so they have a little showdown. And he's like, and so she fires a pretty impressive blast, but he seems to have survived it. This is important as we find out, because she actually, in fact, split him into two timelines within this. I mean, I'm amazed. She seems very wildly irresponsible as well. I think that clearly the mystical group cannot police themselves. So he's like, whoo, I made it. So here he is. I don't know how he got here, but he knows that he's looking for the lost library of Cagliostro. Which was been mentioned in the MCU before. And so, although the Ancient One had some of his books. But anyway, here we have Ikemondi with a very cool shot with the sunlight coming through the trees and his hat. He looks awesome there. And for some reason, he takes him to the library just because he asked. I mean, there's not even a test. I guess the test is that there's no front door, although Stephen Strange easily defeats that by just opening up a portal to the top. He's like, I do this in my sleep. I was like lesson 1 when I was learning the mystical arts. Then things get all Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, although he even throws dirt on it, just like Indiana Jones does. But he doesn't have his father's journal to guide him through it, and he literally steps in it. And I thought that was a great shot with the runes, like Wanda. I have some theories about Wanda, which I'll share a little later on in this breakdown. And the floor falls out from beneath him, which happens a lot with the mystical arts. He did that to Loki. It happens to him again at the end of this episode. And he's in the basement. And I guess that was the one test. I mean, he failed. He got trapped. And the librarian is still like, okay, I'll show you. So, although I thought this was a funny exchange when he's the sorcerer Armani. I thought that was fun. I like that. Classic Marvel humor. Ha, 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 ha. But it works. I liked it. And then there's the library. It's gorgeous. Whoever put that pink tree in the middle there, great choice. And he leaves them. This is maybe why in a library you can only check out so many books, and the librarian has to see what you're checking out. But he leaves Doctor Strange unattended, and I like the way he was going through the books, both floating and then reading through them. And he's like, he reads, because Cagliostro is the only one who figured out how to break an absolute point in time. And apparently you need to absorb other beings. And then he sets up a trap. And this episode, more than I think even the original Doctor Strange film, which I really ended up liking, made me realize that mystical fighting is about, setting up traps in advance and then, and then pulling them, activating them on your prey. So he has a trap set up. He's all ready to feast. He's like set the dinner table, and he opens this up and he goes right for Shuma Gorath, but it's a little bit too big of a meal for him, and he gets thrown around. I like that illustration. I thought that one was particularly good. It looked very comic booky. But I mean, hey, Shuma Gorath made Short Order of the Red Skull as well in episode 1, and that should give Doctor Strange some pause right there whenever you and Red Skull are doing the same thing. So again, the librarian nursed him back to health, right? He's got the classic lady bandage on there, like to protect his modesty. That's why I thought that was interesting. You see that, like Mulan had that in her movie. So anyway, and then he has this, the librarian says, hey, I can, although I thought it was a very close-minded idea about love when he says, is she worth it? I guess maybe the librarian could sense who it was, but today you don't know who Doctor Strange loves, and what the relationship is. You just know that there's love there. But anyway, he says, love can not only break the heart, but shatter the mind. And Doctor Strange is like, you ain't seen nothing yet. So he starts out small with a little appetizer, and that guy was a cute little appetizer. And so he absorbs him, and he's like, more. But he doesn't want to eat a bug, but he will. Although, I would think, considering how Doctor Strange in the first movie traveled the world, I don't think that he would feel that way. But he will mug a bug. First cape. So he takes the cape, which is like, an evil cape. I'm like, if you put that on, it looks like villain clothing. It's not even like on the line. Like, at least, I'm like, it's a purple scalloped cape. It is evil. So anyway, he feasts, and as he does, it changes him. It changes him, outside and in, I'm sure. So he's really going to town, and the Watcher's like, man, maybe I should do something. And he's like, I bet he wouldn't even listen. And then he literally does listen, as Doctor Strange is like, who said that? So they have time pass by, but we're not aware of how much time until in just a moment. So he's going through, and then we have that great shot when he finally decides to absorb Shuma Gorath, and he does. And he's like, okay, I'm all done. Let me go see how the librarian's doing. And he's gotten old. And he said, I'll reverse time, I'll bring you back. And the librarian's like, no, that's fine. I'm a little embarrassed that I let you get away with this, so I'm just going to peace out. But he says, death is a part of even our life cycle. Although, is it because the librarian lived for longer? But anyway, this is where he tells, and then the librarian makes even another mistake and tells him about the other Doctor Strange. And he's like, hey, have you maybe wondered why you're not as powerful as you should be? It's because you're split between two Doctor Stranges. So the other Doctor Strange, we find out, just woke up and decided to go have that tea with Wong. So he comes outside, and I like that joke about how strong was that whiskey. And the Ancient One is like, hey, it's me again. I messed up your life. I split you into two, and now you got to go deal with it. And this is where he says, I have an evil twin. And she's like, more misunderstood. And you're like, that's evil. So he and Wong are preparing here. And I liked the sequence. I liked their camaraderie. I was actually quite moved by Wong disappearing, which is good because that's the motivation for Strange not to also, this good Strange to also want to save Christine because he wants to save Wong. And they put a shield, basically, a spell of protection on Strange, which I thought was used really well. More runes. And I like this. Again, this is about, setting a trap. And they're like, oh, he's found me and this isn't good. And he's like, that's not good. That's not great. And Wong says, nope, it's not. Because it means that the other Doctor Strange, evil Doctor Strange, is already ahead of him. Who knows how many traps he already has ready to go. So he gets sucked down and he's already contained. And that Doctor Strange, you see him in the shadows with the chimera, all the different beings that he's digested. He's like, that stuff's not going down easy. And then they face off in some pretty cool shots of good and evil Doctor Strange. And you can see how powerful this other guy is. It's really cool. And then he takes him back to the accident, and he's like, we can save her if we combine our powers together. And I like good Doctor Strange's line here. He says, this is our arrogance. This is what got us into trouble in the first place, our need to fix everything. And so I'm like, okay, key character trait. And how is your arrogance different? I don't want to describe Tony Stark as arrogant, quite frankly. So maybe that's one of the differences. You don't see any, maybe we will see an evil Tony Stark. I don't want to say anymore. All right, so anyway. So I loved how so they fight. Of course they have to fight. Doctor Strange versus Doctor Strange. Cloak versus cloak. But anyway, I liked that as they fought, the spell of protection would gradually wear off. I thought that was really cool. So first he tries to eat him. That doesn't go well. So they have a fight. And, good Doctor Strange is, partial to defense. Don't play defense. What's a good defense? A good offense. Come on. So evil Doctor Strange is using Shuma Gorath. He can mutate into these different creatures that he's absorbed. And, it's not going well for good Doctor Strange. So Clokey decides to try and save him, and he wraps his arms up and he kills Clokey. I was devastated. And then this was one of my favorite shots from the shadow behind Doctor Strange, who's distracted by the light. What is he, an underwater creature? That thing from Finding Nemo? But anyway, evil Doctor Strange is behind him and sucks him into the shadow realm where he pretends to be Christine, right? I mean, Loki started this dating yourself stuff. So he's like, oh, hey, remember me? I love you. And then he's like, no, you're not her. And then evil Doctor Strange is like, fine, we'll do this the hard way. And he punches the last of that protection spell off of him. And he not only punches him, but I love that he had him used him as a landing cushion, which not only protects evil Doctor Strange, but really took off the last of that protection spell. And I love that for the very last little speck of it, he just brushed it aside. That was really cool. And I have to say, good Doctor Strange did not go out with dignity. He was kind of crying. I was like, come on, man. So he sucks him in, and that made me wonder, will he try to absorb Wanda? How will these Doctor Stranges, good and evil, factor into the Wanda situation? Will they both compete for her to influence her? Will evil Doctor Strange want to absorb Wanda? If he wants to make the internet hate him, but he is a villain. So he absorbs him, he does it. And he casts this spell and he gets all mutated. But I thought this was actually very poetic and beautiful when he takes the car apart and he brings her soul back to life. And he's a monster. But she's not into Beauty and the Beast. That's not one of her favorite fairy tales, because she backs away, almost goes off the side of the cliff. I couldn't believe it either, evil Doctor Strange. So he lifts her up on this piece of rock, and he can see that, what's left for them. The universe is literally closing in on them, and he tries to keep it at bay. And so he goes to the Watcher. He's like, I know you've been watching, you pervert. He's like, you've been watching us this whole time. Do something. And this was a great bit of banter. And I like that they made the Watcher look like Jeffrey Wright. I'm like, are you going to shave Jeffrey Wright all of his hair off his whole body and make him be the Watcher? Let's do it. Jeffrey Wright needs as much work as possible. He's fantastic. So he says, you're a god. He tries to bargain with yet another entity. And he goes, you're a god. And the Watcher goes, I am not a god, and neither are you. Slap it on a t-shirt, embroider it on a pillow. So, life lesson. And so the Watcher just leaves him in this little prison that he's left in. And I thought this was a really great final moment between the two of them. And the Watcher says the final lines of, if anyone should realize that meddling with time and events only leads to more destruction, it's you, which is why the Watcher won't do it. And we're like, interesting, because that's exactly what they're doing in Spider-Man No Way Home. How many times is this going to happen in the MCU? So Christine is the last of his universe to disappear, perhaps because she was the last thing to come into it. And I love that her last lines were, Steven, what did you do? I was like, way to twist the knife there. I love it. And then he's just left alone. He watches her dissipate, and he's left alone in his prison. And which, maybe he'll escape from pretty soon. And then the Watcher goes, one moment ruined everything. And I didn't think that was true this time around. I thought there were multiple moments where he could have stopped or been stopped, and nobody did anything. That's also, I think, very important. So that was this week's episode of the Watcher's What If. I thought it was excellent, and I'm very excited. I guess at the very least people will go back and watch this when they see Doctor Strange too. But what did you think? What do you think of evil Doctor Strange? Is he truly evil, or is he just misguided? He said he was so sorry at the very end. I'd like him to be evil. I don't need a good Doctor Strange and a deep down good Doctor Strange. I want a good and an evil one. All right, share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.